They feared the beast in chains, until the Alpha King pointed and said, "I take him." Few dared venture there, for at its heart stood the castle of the vampire king, Lord Caelan. Even from miles away, its spires pierced the sky like black shards, and rumors said the king judged hearts as easily as swords. He was feared, untouchable, and endlessly mysterious. Alara had heard these stories all her life. She had no illusions about beauty or power. Her face bore the marks of the fire that had destroyed her home when she was just a girl. The skin on her arms and cheeks was scarred, reminders of a past she wished she could forget. Life had not been kind. She had fought to survive, alone, raising her daughter Lyra with the little she had. Lyra, with her bright eyes and gentle laugh, was the only light in Alara's shadowed world. At night, when the small cottage creaked and the wind whispered outside, Alara would sit by the fire and tell her stories of heroes, magic, and courage. Sometimes she would touch her own scars, thinking of the fire that had taken her family, and wonder if anyone would ever see the strength beneath the burned skin. The morning began like any other, cold and quiet. Alara had just finished sweeping the small porch when a royal messenger arrived. He wore the insignia of the Vampire King, a silver cloak with a crest of a black-winged serpent. "By command of His Majesty, Lord Caelan," the messenger said, bowing low. "Those of courage, heart, and secrets are summoned to the castle. Your presence is requested." Alara's heart tightened. Courage, heart, and secrets. She had all three, though courage and heart had been tested more than most could imagine. But the thought of facing the king, of standing before a man who was said to see the very soul of those who approached him, filled her with fear. Lyra ran forward, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, maybe he wants to help us," she said, hope bright in her small eyes. Alara knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from Lyra's face. "Maybe, love, or maybe he will see my scars and think we are nothing, but we have no choice now. We must go." The journey to the castle was long and silent. Alara held Lyra's hand tightly as the woods grew darker, the trees closing around them like watchful sentinels. Every step forward was a reminder of how small and fragile they were in a world ruled by shadows. When the castle first came into view, its dark stones glimmered under the rising sun, as though the structure itself had absorbed centuries of secrets. Guards lined the path, silent and still, their eyes sharp and unblinking. They did not move as Alara approached, but their presence alone was a warning. Here, nothing escaped scrutiny. Inside, the castle was colder than any winter wind. High ceilings loomed overhead, and long banners, black with silver embroidery, hung silently from the walls. Shadows stretched in impossible shapes, and the faint scent of old magic lingered in the air. Alara's steps echoed as she walked down the vast corridor, Lyra close beside her. Finally, they reached the throne room. The room was immense, with windows that let in only slivers of light. At the far end sat Lord Caelan, tall and commanding, his dark hair falling over pale shoulders. His eyes were deep pools of color, seeming to look straight into the heart. Nobles and courtiers whispered behind silk curtains, their eyes sharp with judgment. Alara felt the weight of 1,000 gazes, but her daughter squeezed her hand, reminding her of what truly mattered. She stepped forward, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am Alara of Ashford." "This is my daughter, Lyra." The room fell silent. Caelan's eyes, impossibly dark, traveled slowly over her, pausing at the scars that ran along her arms and face. Alara stiffened, expecting the worst. A dismissive look, a cruel word, a gesture that would send them away humiliated. Instead, something unexpected happened. Caelan rose from his throne and walked down the steps. His presence was both terrifying and magnetic. He stopped before her and extended his hand, not in accusation, not in judgment, but as if offering an unspoken truce. Alara hesitated. This man, the feared Vampire King, was holding out his hand to her, a scarred, ordinary woman. Her heart pounded in disbelief. Your scars speak of courage, Kalen said, his voice low and smooth, carrying authority yet a surprising warmth. Many fear what they cannot control. You have endured what few could survive. The courtiers gasped. No mortal had ever been treated with such respect in this court. Alara's hand trembled as she placed it in his. A strange warmth spread from his touch, filling the cold room with a quiet, unspoken promise. Lyra's small hand reached for hers, and together they felt for the first time in years that maybe they were not completely alone in the world. "Thank you, my lord," Alara said softly, unsure if the words were enough. Kalen inclined his head. "You are here because your strength is rare, and because the night is coming that will test us all. I see more in you than any courtier ever could. Stay within these walls. Learn our ways, and perhaps together we will find the courage to face what approaches." Alara's mind raced. Stay within the castle, with a vampire king. The whispers of danger filled her thoughts, but there was a glimmer of hope, a chance for protection, for knowledge, for safety. And perhaps, just perhaps, a chance to heal a part of herself she had long believed broken. As they were escorted to their chambers, Alara looked out the high windows. The castle stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of stone and shadow. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the world cloaked in twilight. She wondered what the future would bring. Could a scarred, ordinary woman truly find a place in the world of kings and shadows? Could she, who had always fought alone, trust another with her heart? Her thoughts were interrupted by Lyra, who pressed close to her. "Mom, do you think he likes us?" Alara smiled, brushing a kiss across her daughter's hair. "I think maybe he does, but what matters most is that we stay strong, together." That night Alara lay awake, listening to the soft hum of the castle. Somewhere in the distance, Kalen's footsteps echoed in the corridors. The darkness outside pressed against the walls, alive with secrets and threats. Yet inside, for the first time in many years, Alara felt a cautious hope. She had survived fires, loss, and the judgment of the world. Perhaps, she thought, she could survive this new, strange chapter as well. And then, in the quiet, a soft knock came at the door. Kalen's voice followed, low and certain. "Alara, I wish to show you something. Come to the balcony." With Lyra in her arms, she followed him. When they stepped onto the balcony, the moon hung large and full in the sky, casting silver light over the castle gardens. Kalen moved beside her, silent and still. "This world is darker than most can imagine," he said, eyes reflecting moonlight. "And yet, it is your courage that gives it light." Alara's heart beat fast. She wanted to ask him many questions, but words failed her. She simply held Lyra closer, feeling the warmth of the night and the gentle weight of Kalen's presence nearby. Then, without warning, Kalen extended his hand again, this time toward her daughter. "And your heart," he said softly, "is a shield stronger than you know." Lyra looked up at him, wide-eyed, and hesitated. Then, with a shy smile, she placed her small hand in his. Alara watched, tears brimming, as the two figures, one a child scarred by survival, the other a king feared for centuries, formed a silent bond in the moonlight. The courtiers had whispered of rejection. The world expected disdain. Yet in that moment a scarred mother and her child were seen, fully and without judgment, by a king whose heart had long been thought closed. Alara's pulse quickened. What had begun as fear, uncertainty, and hesitation now carried a faint, radiant glow of something dangerous and new: trust, curiosity, and perhaps hope. As the night deepened and the castle's shadows stretched long, a distant howl cut through the still air. Alara's eyes met Kalen's. There was a warning in that sound, a reminder that darkness was never far. But tonight, she realized, courage was stronger than fear, and hearts, even scarred ones, could find recognition where it was least expected. The hand he had held, the words he had spoken, and the quiet bond forming under the silver light were only the beginning. And deep within the shadowed halls, unseen and waiting, danger stirred. The night was only just beginning. The castle of Lord Kalen was a maze of corridors, shadowed halls, and towering staircases that seemed to climb into the clouds. By day, sunlight barely reached the stone floors. By night, flickering torches and silver moonlight cast dancing shadows. To Alara, every corner felt alive, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets. She had been granted chambers near the central tower, a place where she and Lyra could stay safely. The rooms were cold at first, but warmth grew slowly, as if the castle itself acknowledged her presence. Lyra explored with fearless curiosity, running along the hallways and peeking behind velvet curtains. She laughed often, a sound that brought a rare smile to Alara's lips. Yet beneath the laughter, Alara felt the weight of her scars. Not just those burned into her skin, but the invisible ones. The fear of judgment, the constant sense of being out of place, and the heavy responsibility of protecting her daughter. Even in this strange castle, she felt the pull of the world outside, where people would never understand the life she had lived. It was on the second night that Kaelin invited her to the library, a vast room of ancient books, maps, and artifacts. Shelves stretched high, nearly touching the vaulted ceiling, and the air smelled of old parchment and candle wax. Kaelin stood by a window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens, his expression unreadable. "You have questions," he said quietly, turning toward her. "I can see them in your eyes." Alara hesitated, unsure if she should speak. I do," she admitted. "Why me? Why not one of your courtiers? Why me with my scars and my daughter?" Kaelin's eyes softened just slightly, though his presence remained commanding. "Many come before me seeking attention, power, or wealth. You bring none of those things. You bring courage, and the heart of a mother. Those are rarer than beauty or titles." Alara felt a warmth she had not known in years. Someone feared and powerful was seeing her not for her flaws but for her strength. She swallowed hard, fighting the sudden tears that threatened to fall. "You will see many things here that challenge you," Kaelin continued. "The court is not kind to outsiders and even less to mortals, but if you survive and if you trust yourself, you may find a place you never imagined." He stepped closer, the shadows of the library stretching like silent witnesses around them. "I will teach you. Not as a king teaches a subject, but as one who understands loss and survival teaches another. And you will teach me things I have long forgotten." Alara blinked, unsure of what he meant. Kaelin's presence was both frightening and comforting. "Teach you? What could I teach a king?" Kaelin smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Resilience, love, the courage to continue even when the world rejects you. You have lived in fire and pain, and yet you stand here. Many who wear crowns could not endure what you have endured." That night they walked together along the balcony, Lyra's small hand tucked into hers. The moon was full, painting the gardens in silver light. Alara had never known such quiet power, the kind that commanded attention without raising a hand. Kaelin's presence was both protective and enigmatic, drawing her in while reminding her of the dangers outside the walls. "It is strange," Alara said softly, "to feel safe, even just a little. I have never felt that in years." Kaelin's gaze held hers, dark and deep. "Safety is a fragile thing, but it can grow if one chooses to believe in it. You are stronger than most give themselves credit for, Alara. Do not forget that." Days passed, each bringing lessons in both the ways of the castle and the unseen world that Kaelin ruled. She learned to walk without drawing attention, to read the signs of danger, and to understand subtle power plays within the court. Nobles whispered behind silk curtains, some curious, some hostile. They did not understand how a mortal woman could enter their world, let alone command the attention of their king. Yet, Kaelin treated her as an equal, though not without expectation. He demanded courage, honesty, and intelligence, never sympathy or pity. Slowly, Alara began to feel her confidence grow, not in the way the world measured worth, but in the way that truly mattered: the courage to face shadowed nights and the strength to protect her daughter. One evening, Kaelin led Alara to the moonlit gardens, where silver fountains shimmered and strange flowers glowed faintly in the darkness. The air was heavy with magic, and for the first time, Alara felt the pulse of the castle itself, the life hidden within stone and shadow. "You see the beauty," Kaelin said, gesturing to the gardens, "but also the danger. The two often exist side by side. You like these gardens are both delicate and resilient. That balance is rare." Alara's heart swelled, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe in it. She thought of Lyra, of the long nights spent surviving fire and hunger, and of the future she wanted, one where they could live without fear. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by a sudden movement in the shadows. A low growl echoed through the garden. Lyra froze, clutching her mother's hand. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, and in a swift motion he vanished into the darkness, silent as a shadow. Moments later, a creature, a dark, spectral wolf, emerged, its eyes glowing with unnatural light. It lunged toward Lyra, but Kaelin was there instantly, moving with the speed and precision of centuries of experience. He struck the creature, and it dissipated into mist before it could harm them. Alara's hands shook as Kaelin returned to her side, his expression unreadable. "It was not chance," he said. "Someone seeks to test you, to see if you and your daughter are vulnerable. That is why you were summoned." Fear and awe collided within her. She had known there were dangers beyond her village, but nothing like this. And yet, even as her pulse raced, she felt something else, a strange trust, the sense that Kaelin would not allow harm to come to them. Why would anyone want to hurt us?" she asked, voice trembling. Kaelin's gaze was distant. "Because strength, courage, and hope are threats to those who live in shadows. You and your daughter possess something many cannot bear to see, and that is why you must learn to protect yourselves, with me or without." Alara's mind raced. She thought of the world she had left behind, of neighbors who whispered cruelly, of the fire that had taken everything she loved. And she realized that in Kaelin she had found an unexpected ally, someone who saw beyond the surface, who valued her for the courage she had earned rather than the beauty she had lost. In the days that followed, the castle became a school of shadows and light. Kaelin taught her to move silently through the halls, to read subtle signs of danger, and to understand the creatures and magic that roamed the night. Alara was a quick learner, her mind sharp and her instincts honed by years of survival. Lyra adapted quickly as well, learning not only the castle's secrets but also the subtle ways of its people. She shadowed her mother, asking questions, absorbing knowledge, and growing brave in a world that had once been frightening. One night, as Alara practiced walking silently along a corridor, Kaelin appeared beside her. "You are learning quickly," he said, "faster than I expected." Alara smiled faintly, a mix of pride and unease. "I have to, for her," she said, glancing at Lyra, "for my daughter." Kaelin's gaze softened and he reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "And for yourself," he said, "do not forget that courage is not only for others, it is for you as well." The bond between them deepened, not yet love but something fragile and powerful, trust. The kind that grows slowly, like a candle burning steadily in the dark. And yet the castle was never truly safe. Shadows moved, whispers plotted, and eyes watched from corners where no one should be. One evening, as they walked in the gardens under the moonlight, a distant scream echoed from the outer walls. Lyra clung to her mother, fear evident in her wide eyes. Kaelin's hand shot out, steadying them both. "They are testing us," he said. "The court, the creatures, those who oppose what you represent, you must be ready." Alara's heart pounded, but she nodded. "I will be ready," she said, her voice firmer than she felt, "for Lyra and for you." Kaelin's eyes softened just slightly, and he extended his hand, not as a king but as a protector. Alara took it, feeling the warmth and power beneath the surface. The night held them, three figures bound by courage, fear, and the beginning of a bond that neither fully understood. And then from the shadows of the garden a dark figure watched, silent, patient, waiting. Not all threats came from without. Some stirred from within the walls of the castle, fueled by envy and centuries-old grudges. Alara did not yet know that the next challenge would test not only her courage, but her heart, and the fragile trust forming between her and the Vampire King. The night was quiet for now, but the storm was coming. And for the first time, Alara realized that the life she had known, simple, fearful, scarred, was gone. Ahead lay danger, magic, and the possibility of something extraordinary. She gripped Kaelin's hand, and together they faced the moonlit darkness, unaware that their bond, once tested, would ignite a fire no shadow could ever fully consume. The castle was quieter than usual the morning after the strange figure had been seen in the gardens. Shadows still clung to the stone walls, moving like living things in the corners of Alara's vision. The encounter had left her uneasy, a reminder that the world she had entered was not as safe as it seemed, no matter the protection of Lord Kaelin. Lyra, however, seemed oblivious to the danger. She ran through the corridors, her laughter echoing and lifting the heavy air of the castle. Alara followed, smiling despite the weight in her chest. She had learned quickly how to navigate these halls, how to recognize subtle cues, and how to move silently when needed. Kaelin had been a patient teacher, though his lessons were often cloaked in cryptic words and sudden challenges. That evening, Kaelin called her to the central tower, where the moon poured through high windows, casting silver light across the cold stone floors. Alara found him standing near the balcony, looking out over the distant hills. His face, pale and striking in the moonlight, held an expression she could not read, part caution, part curiosity, part something else that made her chest tighten. "Tonight," he said, turning to her, "you will learn more than the skills of survival. You will learn the weight of choice and the cost of courage." Alara nodded, uncertain but resolute. She had grown in strength and confidence since arriving, but she still carried the fears of the life she had left behind. Every scar, every sleepless night had shaped her, and now she stood at the threshold of a challenge she could not yet see fully. Kaelin led her to the moonlit gardens, where the statues seemed to watch them, frozen in time. "The figure you saw before," he said softly, "was a warning. Not all in this castle or beyond will welcome your presence. There are those who resent the courage you carry and the hope you bring." Alara's pulse quickened. She had thought that the court's whispers were the only threat, but now she realized that danger could come in forms she could not yet understand. She clutched Lyra's hand tightly, aware that the safety of her daughter was as much her responsibility here as it had been in Ashford. As they walked, Kaelin explained the complexities of his world. Vampires, he said, were not merely predators. They were bound by ancient laws, by curses that shaped their existence. He himself carried a curse older than most could imagine, a price for the immortality he possessed, a cost for the centuries he had walked the night. His heart, capable of deep feeling, was shackled, unable to form attachments without consequence. "You must understand," Kaelin said, his gaze steady on hers, "that what we feel here is rare and fragile. Trust, love, loyalty, they are not simple matters in this world. Even I must choose carefully whom I allow close." Alara listened, absorbing every word. She realized that the bond forming between them was not merely one of protection or curiosity. It was something deeper, something dangerous in its potential. She wanted to trust him fully, but the lessons of her past whispered caution. She had survived loss, betrayal, and fire. Could she survive a connection that promised both wonder and heartbreak? Before she could answer, a commotion arose near the castle gates. Guards shouted warnings, and a distant figure ran through the courtyard, a shadowed silhouette against the moonlight. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, and in an instant his movements became a blur of precision and power. Alara felt a rush of fear and awe as he disappeared from her side, returning moments later with the intruder subdued. It was a messenger from a distant noble house, one that had survived the fire in Alara's past. The message was clear. They knew she was in the castle, and they intended to use her daughter as leverage to reclaim what they believed was stolen from them. Alara's chest tightened. The fire she had thought was behind her was reaching forward, threatening everything she had worked to protect. Kaelin's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her even as fear rose like a tide. "You must be ready," he said. "Courage alone will not save you now. You must act with strategy, with insight, and with the heart of a mother guiding you." In the following days, the castle transformed from a place of lessons to a fortress of preparation. Alara trained with Kaelin, learning not just defense, but awareness. She learned to sense danger, to anticipate threats, and to move with stealth and precision. Lyra, though young, was taught to be alert, to listen, and to follow her mother's lead without fear. Despite the lessons, tension grew between Alara and Kaelin, not in anger but in unspoken emotions. Every glance, every brush of a hand carried weight. Alara found herself drawn to his quiet strength, to the power restrained in his every movement, to the vulnerability he never spoke of but which shimmered in his eyes when he looked at her. One night, after another long day of training, they walked together along the balcony. The moon was full, its light casting silver patterns across the stone floors. Lyra slept inside, her small body curled under warm blankets. "Alara," Kaelin began, his voice low and steady, "there is something you must understand. The bond we share, though unspoken, is rare. But it carries danger. Every feeling I allow myself to have is a risk. To you, to Lyra, to me." Alara's heart beat fast. She wanted to speak, to tell him that her heart had already begun to trust him, that her daughter and she would follow him anywhere. Yet words faltered. Instead, she nodded, understanding the gravity of his warning. Kaelin's gaze softened. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, careful not to touch her scars but acknowledging their existence with reverence. "Do not fear me," he whispered. "Fear the darkness outside these walls, not the bond we are forming." Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from the courtyard. The distant shouts of guards and the clatter of hooves on stone told them that their enemies had moved. Kaelin's expression hardened. He pulled Alara behind a stone column, shielding her from view. "They have chosen this night," he said, eyes scanning the shadows, "to strike at what they cannot control. You must remain close to me and trust in what we have learned." The next moments passed in tense silence. Figures cloaked in dark robes moved through the courtyard, silent and precise. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, but she followed Kaelin's instructions, moving with quiet efficiency, her senses alert to every sound and shadow. Lyra, awakened by the commotion, remained in her chambers, protected by guards trained in Kaelin's methods. Kaelin struck with swift, controlled force, his centuries of experience evident in every move. Alara watched, awed by his precision and power, and yet a strange warmth rose within her. She realized in the midst of fear and danger that she trusted him fully, more than she had trusted anyone in years. The attackers were repelled, their intentions thwarted, but the threat had not passed. Kaelin turned to her afterward, his expression unreadable. "This was only the beginning. Those who oppose you, who fear what you represent, will not stop. You and Lyra are targets, but you are also symbols. Symbols of courage and hope. Symbols that some cannot bear to see." Alara's chest tightened. She had always thought survival was enough, but now she realized that her existence, and Lyra's, carried weight she had never imagined. And yet, even as fear rose, a fierce determination took root. She would not allow them to be pawns. She would not run. Kaelin's hand found hers again, firm and grounding. "You are stronger than you realize," he said. "And together we are stronger than they can imagine." In the quiet that followed, Alara felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Hope, mingled with a budding affection she could not yet name. She looked at Kaelin, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight, and understood that their bond was no longer simple trust. It carried the weight of shared danger, of unspoken emotions, and of the courage to face shadows both outside and within. The night deepened, and the castle settled into tense silence once more. Yet even in the stillness, Alara knew that the coming days would test them further. Her past, the enemies she had thought behind her, and the court's whispered plots would converge, challenging every lesson she had learned and every bond she had formed. As she held Kaelin's hand, she whispered softly, "I will not run. I will face whatever comes." Kaelin's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "And I will stand with you, always." From the shadows of the highest tower, unseen eyes watched. Plans were being made, alliances forged in silence, and threats born of jealousy and fear. The danger was far from over. Alara tightened her grip on Kaelin's hand, feeling the strength in his presence, the warmth of trust, and the promise of courage. Whatever came next, she knew they would face it together. And yet, the night held secrets still, waiting to test the limits of their courage, their hearts, and the fragile bond forming between a scarred mother and a king cursed by immortality. The first light of dawn crept through the tall windows of the castle, painting the stone floors in pale gold. The air was heavy with tension. The quiet that had settled over the night was only the calm before the storm. Alara awoke with a sense of urgency. Lyra still slept, unaware of the dangers that had been closing in, and Kaelin was already gone from her chamber, moving silently through the corridors. The castle was alive in a way it rarely allowed. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the faint hum of magic vibrated through the walls. Alara dressed quickly, her mind racing. The events of the past nights had left her aware of the truth. Danger could strike at any moment, and the enemies they faced were cunning, patient, and relentless. She found Kaelin in the training hall, where light from torches flickered across stone walls. His expression was calm, almost serene, but there was a weight behind his eyes, a recognition that the coming challenge would test more than their skills. It would test their hearts. "You are ready," he said simply. "And yet no one is ever truly ready for what comes next. Courage, strength, and trust will be our only allies." Alara nodded, her resolve firm. She had survived fire, betrayal, and endless hardships. She could survive this as well. And she would, not only for herself but for Lyra, whose small hands had become a symbol of hope in the darkness. The first wave of attackers came as the sun rose. Shadows shifted, and figures cloaked in dark robes appeared at the castle gates. Their intentions were clear: to capture Alara and use Lyra as leverage against Kaelin. Guards sprang into action, but Alara and Kaelin moved to the forefront, their presence a force that turned fear into courage. Alara's training with Kaelin proved invaluable. She moved with precision, anticipating movements and signaling to the guards. Each strike, each careful step, was guided by the lessons he had taught her. But it was not just skill that carried them through. It was the bond between them, unspoken but powerful, that allowed them to act as one. Kaelin's movements were fluid and decisive, a deadly grace that left attackers stunned and off balance. Alara watched him, awe mixing with trust. She realized that her own strength had grown, not only from training but from the courage she had found within herself. She was no longer just a mother protecting her child. She was a protector in her own right, a force to be reckoned with. The battle was fierce but brief. The intruders were driven back, retreating into the shadows from which they had come. The castle gates closed and silence returned, heavy but relieved. Alara's hands trembled from the adrenaline, but Kaelin's presence steadied her, grounding her with a quiet warmth. "You fought well," he said, his voice low and steady. "Bravery is not without its consequences, but it is always rewarded by knowledge of one's own strength." Alara nodded, tears prickling her eyes. "I would fight again," she admitted softly. "For Lyra, for you, and for myself." Kaelin's gaze lingered on her, dark and intense, yet gentle. "You do not yet understand the full measure of what you have become. You are more than a survivor. You are a light in a world that often forgets to value such things." The next hours passed in quiet recovery. Lyra remained asleep, her small body curled in warmth and safety. Alara tended to minor injuries, checked the castle defenses, and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every scar on her body, every hardship endured, had led to this moment. She realized that courage was not just in surviving, it was in facing the unknown with an open heart, and in trusting others enough to share the burden. Kaelin joined her later in the gardens, the moon replaced by the pale morning sun. Flowers glimmered with dew and the fountains reflected the golden light. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the passage of a chapter in their lives. "Ilara," Kaelin began, his voice unusually soft, "tonight tested us, and yet we have endured. Not merely survived, but grown stronger." Alara looked at him, feeling the depth of his words. She had come to the castle expecting judgment, rejection, and fear. Instead, she found guidance, protection, and an understanding that transcended appearances. Her scars, once symbols of loss and pain, had become markers of resilience and courage. Kaelin stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "The bond we share," he continued, "has been forged not in ease but in fire and shadow. You have trusted me with your daughter, with your life, and with your heart. That trust is rare, and it carries a weight that is not given lightly." Alara felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear and hope. I trust you," she whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I trust you because you have shown me that trust is not weakness, it is strength." Kaelin's expression softened, the lines of centuries etched upon his face giving way to something almost tender. He reached out, brushing a hand gently over her scars, acknowledging them without fear or judgment. "And I trust you, Alara," he said, "because you are more than the past that shaped you. You are more than the pain you have endured. You are extraordinary." Alara's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel completely seen. Not just by Kaelin, not just by the castle, but by someone who had the power to reject her and chose instead to stand beside her. Suddenly, a distant howl echoed from the forest beyond the castle. Both of them froze, aware that danger was never truly gone. Kaelin's eyes darkened and he stepped closer, protective instinct rising to the surface. "They will come again," he said, his voice calm but certain. "The world outside these walls does not forgive courage or hope easily, but neither will we falter. Together, we are stronger than any shadow that approaches." Alara nodded, gripping his hand. Her own strength mirrored his, grown from fire, fear, and survival. "Then we face them together," she said firmly. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The following weeks were a mixture of vigilance and quiet moments of connection. Alara and Kaelin spent time in the library, sharing knowledge and stories. He taught her the history of vampires, the ancient curses that shaped their lives, and the delicate balance of power within the court. She shared her own history, stories of the fire, of loss, of raising Lyra alone. Each story, each moment of trust, wove a deeper connection between them. Lyra thrived in the castle, her laughter returning as the shadows became less frightening under the protection of Kaelin, and the lessons her mother taught her. The bond between the three of them grew, not just of protection, but of shared courage and trust. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Kaelin led Alara and Lyra to the highest tower. From there, the entire kingdom could be seen, stretching beyond forests, rivers, and valleys, bathed in the glow of twilight. "This kingdom," Kaelin said, "is bound by shadows and light, by power and fear. Yet in the midst of all this, you have found your place, Alara. Not as a visitor, not as someone to be pitied, but as a mother, a protector, and a person of courage." Alara felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined such words, such recognition. She thought of the fire that had marked her, of the world that had judged her, and of the journey that had brought her here. And she realized that redemption was not in erasing the past, but in embracing it and moving forward. Kaelin reached out, taking her hand once more, and Lyra nestled between them, a small symbol of hope and continuity. "We have survived the night," Kaelin said softly, "and the dawn is ours to shape. The shadows may return, but they will not break what we have built together." Alara smiled, tears spilling freely. "Then let the world come," she said. "We will face it together." Kaelin inclined his head, a rare smile touching his lips. "Together," he echoed. The first full light of morning bathed the castle in gold, dispelling some of the shadows, though not all. But within the walls, the warmth of trust, courage, and a budding love formed a shield stronger than any sword or spell. Ilara, scarred but unbroken, knew that she had not only survived, but had become stronger, braver, and capable of hope once more. The world outside might never fully understand her, and the dangers of the night would never fully disappear. Yet, for the first time in her life, Alara felt truly seen, truly valued, and truly capable of facing whatever the future held. Kaelin looked down at her, then at Lyra, and whispered, "You were never meant to be rejected, Alara. You were meant to heal me, and perhaps even more than that, to remind this world that courage and love can endure even in shadows." Alara's hand tightened on his, a silent promise. "Then we endure," she said, "together." The castle, ancient and full of secrets, seemed to sigh in approval. The past, with all its pain and fire, was behind them. Ahead lay the dawn, and with it, the hope of a future shaped not by fear, but by courage, trust, and a bond that could withstand even the darkest of nights. And as the first birds sang beyond the walls and the sun rose fully over the horizon, Alara realized that for the first time in her life, she was home, not just in a place, but in the hearts of those who had come to mean everything. The night was behind them, but its lessons, its shadows, and its truths would remain. They were stronger for it, united in courage, love, and the promise of a dawn that no darkness could ever truly hide.